Hello and welcome to Rights and Recourse, a program that tackles constitutional human rights and legal issues, bringing you information and analysis. My name is Dumile Matez. Remember, you can also be part of our discussion today by calling us on our studio line on 011 714 5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Rights and Recourse. Alternatively, you can email your thoughts about this program and many others to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. 57 years ago, on March 30th, 1960, 24-year-old Cape Town University student Philip Kgosana led a Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania march of about 30,000 people from Langa and Nyanga to the seat of power, the South African Parliament. Tony Hurd, former editor of the Cape Times, writes and says about Philip Kgosana in the march: a slip of a young Cape Town University student with nothing but his bare hands, yet a trudging crowd behind him taking on an armed might of apartheid. That was the awe-inspiring sight I had of Philip Kgosana, making history 2 generations ago. The protesters were going to offer themselves up for arrest for not carrying passes, this in response to a call of civil disobedience by the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania. Police were temporarily paralyzed and indecision. The event was seen by some as a turning point in South African history. On April 20th, Philip Kgosana passed away at the age of 80 and was laid to rest on Friday, April the 28th in Pretoria. Today on Rights and Recourse, we pay tribute to this stalwart and son of the soil. But first, let's have a look at this insert.
The whole thing was after I completed matric in 1958. There was no money to take me to school, and I decided to look for a piece of job. First, I was working for some Coca-Cola company. I was sacked. I went only for 1 week because they thought I was lazy. I didn't work very hard. And then I got a job as a messenger at the Bantu Education offices just near Pretoria station there. Okay. There was some block. Yeah. And I kept carrying these files and seeing the office of Hendrik Verwoerd, knowing this is the man, and W.W. Iselin, you know, the giants of Bantu education. Mm-hmm. And I had, during my matric days, thought that if I did well at matric, I would become a pharmacist. I would do pharmacy. Okay. Only to realize that I was terribly mistaken. After I had done all the physics, chemistry, maths, and all those things that prepare for these sciences, I applied to the pharmaceutical colleges in South Africa. No, there was no Terflu at that time. Okay. I went to all the pharmaceutical colleges around South Africa, and the replies came very hot within a period of 3 weeks to say, well, some of them were a little polite, others were just rude, to say, well, all of them mainly saying, don't you know that the blacks don't do pharmacy in this country? Yes. It was around that period that a gentleman called Robert Sobukwe visited Lady Selborne. 1959, I think. It was around March. Mm. And we were told that he was going to address the meeting somewhere in Lady Selborne, and we went there. And let me tell you, that man has had such tremendous influence over my life. And I think I can call myself PhD because of Sobukwe. I mean, if I'm looking for a saint in this world, you want Saint Sobukwe? That's the man. Yes. And that has influenced my life completely. Mm-hmm. And that is the type of life I live up to today. I could very easily live somewhere. I've been working with the UN, got a comfortable pension, I don't do anything. But, you know, there is this sticking message, you know, which says, but Sobukwe, you know, was the example. Mm-hmm. And that is why we still have to be doing some work to improve the quality of life of our people.
An old clip there of Ndate Kgosana talking to an old friend of mine during his time. To take part in this discussion are Professor Kwandile Kondlo from the University of Johannesburg, Department of Politics, Mr. Jackie Siroke, Secretary of Political Affairs in the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania, Dr. Ngila Mwendana, Lieutenant General, South African National Defence Force, who was in exile with Philip Kgosana. Gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon.
I'm not going to. Anybody can answer.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel, not
General. Lieutenant Colonel. Oh, we've promoted you.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm not asking this question from any person in particular, but despite the impact of the march in Cape Town coming on the heels of the Sharpeville massacre, who was Philip Kgosana?
Well, Philip Kgosana was a member of the PAC and a leader in his own right at the time. But he grew up through his activities, including the much talked about march, to become a national figure and a national icon. He became known throughout the world as one of the outstanding resistance leaders in the liberation movement, and he stands out for that.
Will I be, I think Jackie's putting it nicely, will I be right if I say it is true that before and immediately after Sharpeville, no one had heard of Philip Kgosana?
Yeah, well, it was immediately after Sharpeville that the people knew about him. You know, he's just said there that he's a member of the PAC because of Sobukwe. I can say I'm a member of the PAC because of Philip Kgosana, because he inspired me. I was a young fellow. He's only about, 8 years and 1 day older than me. And he inspired me because he was wearing short pants. I was wearing short pants during that time. And he inspired me, and I looked for the PAC and found it in China Chilwan. So he's that kind of man. He's a visionary, he's a leader, and he's a social activist, and all those things. And he continued to do that. Here at home, went into exile and came back home and continued to do that. Like, for instance, he was able to send people to learn farming. Young people to learn farming.
Well, we'll talk about that, because I did come across an article in the Farmers Weekly about this farming that they were doing with Dr. Mutsonyane in Winterveld. Wonderful. Professor, he had hardly settled in Cape Town as a student. How did he gain the confidence of the people? And how does a 24-year-old commandeer a crowd of 30,000 people, indeed disapproved by the PAC?
But Dumile, I think the first thing we need to clarify is that Philip Kgosana didn't just come from the sky to lead the march that particular day. We're talking here about a young man who has experienced poverty and the brutalities of apartheid, a young man who was a student, and a young man who was also embedded within the structures of the Pan-Africanist Congress. So Philip Kgosana emerged to lead. He was a leader, as my colleague rightly pointed out, within the structures of the PAC. The PAC had done a lot of work on the ground during that time.
I'm actually surprised. A lot of work was done in Cape Town.
Yeah, Cape Town was actually vibrant in terms of Africanism, because as a professor has said here, it was because of the suffering. And people have been suffering in the Transkei and the Ciskei. It was not Ciskei then, but they went through suffering, and they had to migrate to Cape Town. And there, they discovered themselves, and people like Makwetu and Sobukwe himself mobilized.
Clarence Makwetu was in Cape Town too at the time.
Yes, he was the chairman of the province then. And he was one of the people that led the mobilization, but more the conscientization, changing the mindset of the people to discover themselves as to who they were and where they belonged. Because at that time, there was a philosophy saying that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. But Sobukwe said, no, it belongs to you. You are the Africans. And if it is Africa that you're fighting for, then it belongs to you. That is what you must be fighting for. Now, there was that resonance, therefore, between Philip Kgosana's ideas and the ideas of the PAC. You don't just join a liberation movement. You join a liberation movement that resonates with your own ideas. So he had these ideas of Africanism, the ideas of non-racialism, and also went further and said, like Sobukwe, that an African is anyone who pays his sole allegiance to Africa, but also recognizes the democratic role of the indigenous people of Africa, and the color of a person is as irrelevant as the shape of his nose.
I see what you are saying. We can discuss, gentlemen. Don't wait for me to ask a question because I'm not a teacher here. I see what you are saying is exactly what transpired with Patrick Duncan joining the PAC, Patrick Duncan being the son of a former Governor General and decided to join the PAC.
Yes, because he recognized and he wanted to affiliate and with the African people and also resonated with them. And he was actually our representative in Algeria, subsequent to his joining the PAC. So all these.
So he became the only white man to join the PAC.
No, there were many. There was Costa Kazidis too, who used to be our Minister of Health in the PAC. He was Secretary for Health.
Yes, he was. I don't know whether he was based in the Eastern
He
Cape
left the Communist Party and joined the PAC.
I just want to point out something about Philip Kgosana at the time. The PAC was able to organize people who lived in the single-sex hostels.
Because he was staying in a hostel
because
with
he lived with them
who were down in Cape Town.
Yes. So organization that took place came out and was reflected in the march that happened on the 30th of March that day, because there had been intensive work in the evenings and people knew who Kgosana was. So he was a leader who was involved with people who come from different parts of the country, largely from the Eastern Cape and from the rural areas. But he was able to communicate with them very effectively, and they took his leadership wholeheartedly.
Prof, I don't know whether you want to add there. I just wanted to ask something else, to add something else there. It would seem to me like all leaders of his time, he gained his political education. He says Robert Sobukwe came to Lady Selborne. He gained his political education at Lady Selborne. Some of the other leaders of his time gained their education at places like the Kilnerton Institution.
Yes, I've come across that because Philip Kgosana has also written about his life.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. A very interesting book where he actually explains his upbringing and how he got into politics. But very interestingly, he keeps underlining the impact and the influence of Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe on him as a person and also his political outlook. And I want to say that's the kind of leadership a country needs. That's what it means to be a leader, that you have impact because of who you are and because of your political philosophy on the whole mass of people who follow you. That was Robert Sobukwe.
Dr. Mwendane, I'm actually surprised here. Things have hardly changed today. Like many students of his time, here was a student staying in a hostel with old men who came to work in Cape Town, staying in a hostel in the township. How could that be?
Well, already, even before he went to Cape Town, already he was cooked properly. Because in the PAC, people baya khabuliswa from day one. So you understand that even if you are going to be a soldier, you must not be a soldier. You must not be a soldier that does not have any ideology, because then a what you call ideological person with a gun in hand is a criminal. So that is what we used to believe. And then also another what called of the PAC, a belief of the PAC is that not reading is a crime. So everybody had to read. So he was already well read on people like Du Bois, people like Kwame Nkrumah. He was well read on people like Anton Limbede. He had studied Anton Limbede, thoroughly, and he understood this. And he understood where the struggle started. The struggle was about land. The struggle was not about democracy, pure and simple. He had understood that. The struggle was about the people. So he also followed the adage of Sobukwe that we are not political animals, but we are social animals. So socially, therefore, you could merge with those people there. You could speak the language. He understood his tete namasiko, the culture of those people. So he could enter those, the values of the people. You see, once you're a liberation movement, you must merge with the values of the people, because it is the people who liberate themselves. what you do as a liberation movement, you simply identify the values that drive them and align yourself with those values. So that is what Philip Kgosana could do, and he did it quite well. That is why he continued with that kind of culture, even up to arrival back at home from exile.
The other thing is, in a newspaper interview recently, he said when asked whether he was satisfied with what was happening in our democracy today, he says, I quote, "Political power is not an end in itself. It is a means to an end, a tool to achieve social and economic freedom. Our people want food, schools, and houses. What are all of these squatter camps that are around us?" Are you surprised that this resonates with today's narrative of radical economic transformation?
No, I'm really not surprised. Currently, South Africa has a range of problems and difficulties, and all of them are reflected in the levels of poverty that you see in a large section of South Africa's population. And the endemic poverty, in my view, is man-made. It's something that can be resolved if people are serious. But the government of the day has been unable to address that issue effectively. And some of their policies obviously have failed. And there have been extraneous influences that made policies to be taken when they exactly are not working on the ground. The reality of the matter is that the majority of the people still feel downtrodden.
Prof, are you surprised that this statement, I think you made the statement recently, it sounds like it's a recent statement. Are you surprised that it resonates with what people today refer to as radical economic transformation, albeit late in the day?
Yeah, does it really resonate? Because what is radical economic transformation? It's a very loose concept which could be defined in different ways. Could be radical socio-economic transformation which entrenches the benefit of the elites in the economy. They would call it radical. It could be radical if it is inclusive. The downtrodden have a stake, a serious stake in the economy. So I think Philip Kgosana was actually right to be concerned. And he's also right to have been concerned much earlier on about the negotiated settlement. Remember, the PAC questioned the negotiated settlement as a solution to historical injustices which people in the country have experienced. But in the end, the PAC participated and stood firmly underlining that the land question should be at the center of the liberation of black people.
Kgosana, let me just say something else. Kgosana had a political mind. He was extremely gifted. And I want to say this, cite as an example, Comrade Mendani, that the Democratic Party in Botswana, Sir Kitubile Masire, in his autobiography, says that when they had difficulties in the mid-60s, they went to Kgosana for guidance and political discussions, and he contributed there. So many people, when they looked at Kgosana and his ideas, particularly ideas on changing and transformation of society, he was very gifted. In the committee that you belong to, Comrade Mendana again, he proposed that the provinces as they stand right now really bring about retainment of apartheid. And they would create problems.
I think many people have said that. I'm sorry, Jackie. Many people have said that and said the provinces as they are now, many of them represent the old Bantustan boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah, they actually represent tribalism. They further divide our people. I belong to this province, and this language must be spoken. And this is a language that must be taught at school and stuff like that. When you hear people talking about the educational transformation, they will talk about indigenous languages, but in respect to the provinces. So these provinces are perpetuating what we're trying to kill. Well, what the 100 people in Bloemfontein in 1912 tried to kill, because they said we are united as African people, but Mzulu, Xhosa, Msuthu, hlanganani. But now we're dividing Zulu, Xhosa, and through these boundaries. So Philip Kgosana, therefore, subscribed to the original tenets of the liberation struggle in this country. Number one, it was about African unity, and then it was about land, and then it was about identity, who you are and where you come from, and it was about Pan-Africanism, the unity of Africa. And if those ideas had been held, if Kgosana had been given room to articulate on this, the question of xenophobia would never have existed in South Africa.
Well, we'll come back. We'll continue our discussion here. If you'd like to join us in today's discussion, you can call us on 011-714-5497 or 5498 or tweet us at Rights and Recourse. Alternatively, you can email your thoughts to Rights and Recourse at sabc.co.za. Stay with us. Welcome back to Rights and Recourse as we take a look at the life and time of Philip Kgosana. Professor, he gets to Cape Town and he finds a very, what's the word, a ready-made people, because in Cape Town at the time there were a couple of things happening in Cape Town. You had to stay in the city for about 10 years for you to qualify to stay in that city. In other words, you had to go and register every year, where, especially if you find a new job, you have to go and register. You have to carry a pass. It was an area that was regarded as a colored preferential employment area. Black people had to work in factories. He finds this fertile soil.
Yes. Yes, it was a fertile soil, but it needed a lot of work still, and especially to entrench the brand PAC. And I think Philip Kgosana did very well. Not only him, Clarence Makwetu and a couple of others who were there during that time did very well to actually inscribe the value of Pan-Africanism into the minds of many people. And also, we must underline Philip Kgosana's experience as a black student at UCT. This is one thing which has not been written about, the historical experience of black students in a white university like the University of Cape Town.
They come to the university quite at a time, my apology, at a time when Archie Mafeje had applied for a job as a lecturer, senior lecturer, but the university wouldn't take him, wouldn't take him on.
This was part of the dynamics of UCT. Of course, a very liberal institution, but in its liberalism, not really challenging the status quo.
Let's take this call from Fundile from Cape Town. Fundile, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Yes, sir.
Can you speak up, Fundile?
Okay, sir. Mine is as follows. As long as our people, they don't give PAC a chance, PAC needs to be given a chance so that we can expose the Pan-Africanism. As long as PAC are not given a chance in terms of vote, we'll continue to struggle. It means PAC must be given a right place. Our people must vote for PAC. And our ideals as a Pan-Africanist, Pan-Africanism is the supreme ideology. That will take us forward. Not this thing of so-called economic transformation. That thing is only nothing but an radical economic looting. It's not even a transformation, but it's meant for the few, those who are benefiting. As Professor Kondo said, it is only the elite. So as PH, we are saying this is still not on. We said also in Codesa 1, Codesa, these things are not going to advance our people. We want something that is going to advance our people. Hence, we didn't sign the Constitution as PAC. We remain committed to liberate our people. Now we are still neo-colonialist society. We want to liberate our people. I'm saying to the masses of this country, they must vote for PAC. They must not listen to this thing of looting and looting. They must listen to us. We as a PAC, we are still clear. We are behind our people. We are behind the workers. We are behind the citizens. Our people must vote PAC. I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Fundile. Fundile raises something very profound, something I wanted to raise quite early in the discussion, and that was there's been a tug of war around who actually was responsible for Sharpeville, who was responsible, because people were saying, no, this discussion took place in the ANC, and then the PAC jumped and they went and they did it.
Well, for the Sharpeville massacre, the racist regime was responsible.
No, I mean, who organized?
I'm just starting it from there. The party that organized not the Sharpeville thing, but it was a national affair, because there was Kgosana in Cape Town, there was Sobukwe in Orlando, there were other people in other places. So, in fact, it started from this premise that the regime, the racist regime, is able to control our people through the past laws. So the passbook was the instrument that they used to control us. So we identified, or the PAC identified, that passbook as the target of attack. That is why the principle was we go to police stations and hand ourselves over and tell these guys that, look here, arrest us because your law says you must arrest us when we don't have passes. It was not about banning passes. It was leaving passes at home and presenting ourselves. But then the struggle was transforming to something else. We saw other people banning passes now. That was not the whole purpose, which shows that because the refusal to carry passes was started by the members of the PAC, it is quite obvious where it started and who started it.
The issue really is that the PAC strategically came in at a time
if
when...
you can respond to what Fundile was saying too.
Yes, when the PAC came in onto the scene, when there were one-day strikes and some form of demonstrations which were not effective. They did not have an effect on the government of the day, and they could not bring about change. The PAC, led by Sobukwe, said that we are for mass action, as opposed to mere demonstrations and pickets. And in 1960, when the PAC defined its struggle against the past laws, they came with a campaign strategy called the Positive Action Campaign. The Positive Action Campaign was meant to put more pressure on the regime so that it brings about change quickly. It also had a strategy that had a deadline to say this must happen, go by 1963.
Professor, there's something else around the very issue that was being raised here by Jackie. Philip Kgosana, during the march, receives a call from the Minister of Justice. Something very strange. A Minister of Justice said, let me call this. He called him the Klein Kafriki and a Kortbroek.
Yes, I did come across that when I was doing research. That, but it's not really elaborate. You see, it's very difficult to verify because, you see, as I was doing research, I tried to verify documentary evidence against oral traditions. But really, there's limited oral information I could get on whether this was really a call from the minister, or was it a call from one of the minister's functionaries who called as if he was actually the minister himself.
Let's take this call from Amin from Johannesburg. Amin, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse. Hello, Amin.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
First of all, I want to congratulate you, sir, for even remembering the PAC. I want to congratulate you for that, number one. Having great leaders out there on your panel, which is a real, true honor for us. I just want to point out, sir, that had the PAC ideology over the years had been so great, had that been implemented in those years, today we would not be sitting with a problem of land transformation, identification. As Mafrika Mandani pointed out, that Africanism was an identity, an identification of anyone who swore allegiance to Africa. And the history of this is manifested in our past, recent past. You take Zimbabwe, you take Uganda. I mean, we've felt the brunt of it. And we have basically just denied our own progress over the years.
Thank you. I mean, Dr. Mwendane, the other thing for me that was profound in my research was the fact that apparently the Minister of Justice, FC Erasmus, had asked the police, when the leaders come around the corners, you must shoot them. And Colonel Terry Tablanche, refused. He was a Deputy Commissioner of the Western Cape. He refused, said, I can't shoot at people who are marching peacefully.
Yeah, isn't it ironical that someone who carries the same name as a Tablanche in Ventersdorp would actually raise his own conscience and say, no, it is below me to shoot human beings that are non-violent.
I'm actually surprised.
And he lost his job for that.
I'm actually surprised. The minister should have been worried about saying people must be shot because this happens after Sharpeville.
Yeah, exactly. Hadn't they learned their lesson? But this man was a leader enough to realize that there is something called human rights and people must express themselves. But he was one among many. And then he was dismissed. He was only brought back by flock later on. And I hope he got all his pension.
Well, I actually came across some writing and pictures of Philip Kgosana meeting his son, Ignatius Tablanche, in Cape Town recently. And I phoned him before the show and he said he was going to be watching because this, for me, Kgosana's life for him was an important life in the history of his dad, Terry Tablanche.
Yes, it's also an important act of reconciliation because when the son came to Kgosana, he had really come to say there was pressure on the other side. So Kgosana himself was a gentleman, an officer and a gentleman in the true meaning of the phrase. And it is good that Tablanche really was worried about the fact that when he spoke and agreed with Kgosana that the march should be stopped and they should negotiate. He was talking about that honestly. But his bosses turned around and they arrested Kgosana. It was a betrayal that was not in his control. That's what
it was actually, he actually asked the minister to suspend the passes for a day or two. The minister actually acceded to that.
They were actually suspended. That is one feat that the PAC achieved in this country, which is unequaled in the history of colonialism in this country. So they were suspended. But then you see, I think it is well to mention or take note of the fact that although this guy was prepared to negotiate, his bosses were not prepared to negotiate, which gives veracity to the question, to the answer to the question that you have just asked as to whether it was true that the minister called him.
Well, the minister actually, yes, the actual minister invited him to a meeting. And he actually, it was perhaps indicative of the time when the Minister of Justice belittled Kgosana and told Parliament that he had no intention of meeting with Dar de Klein Kafriki and Kortbroek.
And he was arrested. Instead of coming to the meeting, right, he went to the meeting, but there was no meeting. There was arrest.
Let's take this call, Professor, before I come to you from Bulelo in Johannesburg. Bulelo, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse. Hello, Bulelo.
Good afternoon to Mila and all your panelists.
Thank you.
Well, I'm Bulelo Musi in Pretoria from the Department of Military Veterans.
Yes, Bulelo, I've been looking for you. Now I've got you.
Yeah, no, basically I wanted to first of all commend you for putting such an important program.
Thank you very much.
That reflects the legacy of our history through Tate Kgosana. That the two parts I want to speak to is the fact that during our interaction with him as the Department of Military Veterans, we found him as a unifying person who was beginning to say that South Africans, for them to conquer whatever colonialism and apartheid has done, we need to unite. And therefore, he was telling us and instructing us to go far beyond the narrative that is parochial about party politics per se, but to look towards building a nation that will conquer the past. The second part, to me, that was critical about Dr. Kgosana is the fact that he was beginning to say it's important that we take the issue of writing our history, rewriting what has been written in a manner that portrays where Africa comes from, where South Africa locates itself in Africa. And want to urge the youth as the Department of Military Veterans to ensure that we encourage the stories of military veterans are actually recorded so that we can be able to fulfill our agenda of nation building, social cohesion, and ensuring that South Africans enjoy the fruits of freedom that we're celebrating during April.
Thank you very much, Mbulelo. Very good contribution there. Mbulelo Musi from the Department of Military Veterans in the Department of Defense. Another thing, Prof, he was accorded this appointment we're talking about by the minister. And when he arrived, he did not go, was not taken to the minister's office, he was taken to some other office, and he was met by a Captain van der Westhuizen, who told him the minister is not interested in meeting with you under the state of emergency regulations. You are now under arrest. So they arrested him there.
Yes, that is why, as I indicated during the research, that I found documentary evidence to be contradictory. Because, I mean, some newspapers would actually say it was
similar to the number of the people who were marching.
Yes.
Some newspapers, early stories are talking about 2,000.
Yes, yes.
And these days there's talk of 30 and 50,000.
Yes, some newspapers actually say it was a genuine call by the minister, but others would actually give the impression that it was actually a setup. You see, he was set up for the arrest. You see, yeah,
it truly was set up.
During the trial, Dr. Mwendane, they are offered by the strange story. They are offered by the prosecutor. They are offered bail, because the prosecutor wanted to go and get married that weekend. They offered bail, and they refused the bail.
Yeah, bail, in fact, was a principle that was undertaken as early as in 1952, when the defiance campaign was launched by the ANC. And the principle there was no lawyers, rather no defense, no fine, no what, there was
no bail.
No bail. So that principle was carried on by the PAC, because the PAC carried on with the program of action of 1949 of the Youth League. That, look here, let us stop now reacting to laws as they were passed by the regime.
Let us stick to the civil disobedience. Let us stick to
a program. Let us have our program, define the situation that we are facing, define the processes that we must follow, define the options that we have, and define what changes are taking place from time to time. Only in that way will we defeat the regime. But if we are going to react to every law that they pass, then we are not going to win. And that is where this principle of no fine, no defense, and no bail came about. But it was not carried out fully in 1952. But the PAC actually took that, made a resolution that, look here, whenever we're arrested, there won't be any bail that we're going to accept. There won't be any fine that we're going to pay, and we're not going to use defense. It was only later, through the sagacity of Robert Sobukwe, that, look here, let us play these guys at their own game, and let us see how far this thing goes, because these guys are very vicious. They are cruel. They are going to kill our people unnecessarily. So let us allow people to engage defense. That is why in our trial, when we were arrested and sent to Rebel Island, we actually engaged defense, but we never took bail.
Somebody pays the bail. Strangely, somebody, he doesn't mention who pays the bail, but somebody pays the bail. And then Robert Sobukwe issues an instruction that he must skip the country.
Yeah, he was actually told, because we had to have people who are representing us outside, because we realized that pursuing the struggle within, we're just going to be arrested and put in jail for nothing. So these guys were using fire, force against us, So let us go out and train our people to use fire force as well. So the first person that had gone out was Vusmake, who was in the treason trial of 1956. So that was the first one who was told to go out even before the PAC was formed, and met people like Haile Selassie and Kwame Nkrumah and so forth. Now, Kgosana followed the trail. And he was actually given very, very strict instructions, and he was supposed to study, I think, at that time. He had to abandon his studies and go out.
That's a very interesting one, too. But let's take this call, Doctor. Let's take this call from the Eastern Cape. Good afternoon, and welcome to Rights and Recourse. This is Mishak. Mishak, good afternoon.
Hello.
Mhlaz. Your line is terrible. Just say, probably we can listen and hear briefly what you are trying to say, Mishak.
Okay,
uyavakala kodwa uvakala nzima kodwa siyakuva.
Ndivakala nzima.
Itsho Mhlakazi sidibanise nayo tonight. Just tell us what you want to say so that we can respond to it.
Philip lo ngikhathazeka kakhulu Mhlekazi ngoba wafika eShopville wasicela ukuthi what was taken by the gun will returned by the gun. KwaShopville massacre. Shabzile.
It's very difficult to find what Mishek is trying to say there. I don't know whether you are trying to say, Prof, this message to Philip comes from Robert Sobukwe, who himself at the time was incarcerated at Recourse prison.
Yes, but we must not miss the contradiction which is there. And I'm not speaking as a person who has first-hand experience. This is first-hand experience. I'm talking as a scholar.
As a scholar, as a researcher, like myself.
Yes, who's done the research.
As a researcher, not a scholar, me.
Yes, because what you find is that ZB Molete and Molifi actually contested the view that Kgosana received instruction from Sobukwe to go to exile. And Kgosana actually says, look, if you read his book by Kgosana himself, he says he actually had proof that Sobukwe said about 10,000 youths should actually go abroad for not only for military training, but to ensure that the PAC establishes a presence outside South Africa. But ZB Molete was then acting president of the PAC, said, no, you should not go anywhere, remain inside the country. But Kgosana escaped the country, went outside South Africa. That's why you find that during the time when PAC structures were re-established in exile, especially in 1962, you'll find that Kgosana began to experience problems with his colleagues in exile. That is the start of his problems with ANC, with PAC leaders in exile.
Jackie, the Prof says he experienced problems with his colleagues in exile. According to Philip Kgosana, he got an offer from the Lilliput magazine in London, and he was also going to be studying at the London School of Economics. But the party leaders told him, look, we are in a revolution. You are not going to study here.
Yeah, during that time, let the truth be told now. The party was led by Putlako Lebalo. And when I was doing research on the book of Vusimag, I discovered many things about Putlako Lebalo, which I'm not going to share now immediately. I will share them later in my life. I've got them documented in my study. So Putlako Lebalo, although he appeared very, very revolutionary and radical, but whatever he was saying was not backed up by sincerity on his part. So many people were expelled from the PAC, Ngobo and people like those, because they were very, very serious about the struggle. But because Lebalo did not have that kind of sincerity, about the struggle, many people lost their mission. And Kgosana was one of them. But Kgosana was obdurate. He just went on and said, look here, I've got a mission to fulfill. And this is my personal mission. I joined the PAC because of the alliance or resonance between my ideas and those of the PAC. And so he continued. I remember when I was the Director of Social Affairs and Labor, I used to coordinate with him because there were the refugees all over the country. And it did not matter to me whether those refugees were ANC or PAC. But because Kgosana was in a UN office that looked after refugees, I had to coordinate our activities with him. And because he was not sectarian either, in his mind he did not have PAC or ANC, he just had Africans from South Africa and revolutionary and guerrillas and refugees. So he had to look after those people. So in that sense, therefore, with this new leadership that came after Libalo had been expelled from the PAC, you know, because he was sent away, then Kgosana found room for his mission and his activities.
For the time we have left in this discussion, let's touch on his return. He comes back to South Africa. I know he was drafted into the army of Ethiopia by Haile Selassie and became a lieutenant, became an officer there. He also was he trained as a parachute in Ethiopia and came back to South Africa. He becomes a councillor in Pretoria. Why does he choose to become a councillor?
Because he realized that that's the only way that he could serve the African people effectively. You see, there's power and authority. So he had to use the authority that his position gave him to be able to exercise power so that now his people can be liberated from the poverty, unemployment, and the inequality. But he was all alone and operating in a milieu that was not favorable for his idea to succeed. But nevertheless, single-handedly, he was able to train agriculturists and farmers, although they did not have land.
In Winterveld.
Yeah, but he foresaw, because Kgosana could read the mood of the people. Although the PAC started the issue of the land, and it was alone when it did, but now the issue of the land, everybody talks about the land now, and everybody talks about economic empowerment and transformation. But that was started by people like Kgosana, but he continued with it single-handedly, and today we have got farmers that were trained by him working on the land.
I'm actually intrigued, Professor and Jackie, if you get an opportunity to come in, Jackie, we're running quickly out of time, as to why would Kgosana, when they were marching in Cape Town, choose to use the Deval Drive route rather than go through Salt River. They decided to go the Deval because that road was leading straight to Parliament.
Well, the march was to Parliament, and I really cannot say why they chose that route, but it must have been a route that could attract a lot of people and show that the march itself has an impact. I want to go back to the issue of Kgosana. Kgosana believed in accountability as a politician, and his understanding was that if you represent communities, it's far much better than if you represent something that is amorphous and it's not clearly defined. So he wanted to work with communities, as Bramak had said, and the Winterveld constituency understood that. He represented them in the Tshwane.
Prof, quickly, we're quickly running out of time here. I've been told we've got less than 10 minutes. The city of Cape Town have actually put this to the PAC that they are thinking of changing the name of Deval Drive to Philip Kgosana Drive. Has the PAC accepted that, Jackie?
Of course. Of course. Of course. Of course, that's what we have been wanting to
What is the significance of that, Prof?
Well, I think it's in memory. It's in memory of the march which Philip Kgosana led. And I agree with Jackie. I think the reason why they chose Deval Drive really was consolidating the mass and the spirit of people who were marching to take that longer route to Parliament.
The other question now that I wanted to ask, I read somewhere that one of the things Philip wanted to achieve was to bring unity within the PAC. And many people are saying, we are really worried about this organization that has been at the forefront of liberation and the land issue. Now that we have a democracy, this organization is splinter groups and factions, and Kgosana wanted to bring, is the PAC leadership think of dedicate that to Kgosana and get together and become a solid party as they were before?
Well, there's a clear indication within the party, and you can see we're trying to break the stereotype that the PAC is more factionalist, disorganized, and not able to project a good image of itself. So we have work going on the ground. There's a unity committee. There are attempts to talk to everyone. But the principle really is that in the PAC, you join as an individual, and you're accepted as an individual, and not groups. So the difficulty may be that there are entrenched groups who want to bring themselves into the party as groups, and this will not affect democracy or the style of democracy that the PAC wants internally. We're discussing those issues, and we're open-minded about resolving the issue of unity in the party.
Earlier, we also spoke, Doctor, about the history of the PAC, which we want to look at. It's a very fascinating history, which I picked up in this research. We haven't even spoken about Poko and the people who were hanged by the apartheid regime, who have to be reburied, many of them.
Yeah, many are being reburied, and the concept Poko came from the question of identity. That who are we? Singama Africa Poko, which means pure Africans. So and then Poko took the stage. The concept Poko took the stage, and you can see the onomatopic sound of it. Actually says, let us be more radical because we're going to fight now, you know. And then we called ourselves Poko, calling ourselves Apla. So APLA arose from the Poko concept, and that is why it was so vibrant in its approach towards liberation. And many people, more people than any other movement in this country, a liberation movement, were actually hanged in Pretoria.
Well, I remember
it's only now that they are being buried.
There's
now.
A whole family of 6 people from Basha who were sentenced to death, and including a 16-year-old boy.
Yeah, that's
Prof, right. You can have the final word.
I have written a full book on the PAC.
From
the time it was formed, 1959, to about 1993. It's titled "In the Twilight of the Revolution." Exclusive books used to sell that book. It's published by Basel Africa Bibliografien in Switzerland. I can make a copy of that book available for you to read.
The other one that you write in that book, I think that is the book I'm talking about, about the Ruvu camp in Tanzania. And you write the issues pertaining to health, culture, tribalism, corporal punishment, as well as the general politics of the camp in order to expose a concrete basis of internal strife within the PAC. You write about those things.
Yes.
You make mention about it.
Yes.
If you can just in a minute.
No, basically I was trying to trace the roots of divisions and disunity within the Pan-Africanist Congress.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
But I should have mentioned that the problems that the PAC had are not the problems of the PAC. In the same way that the problems that the ANC has are not the problems of the ANC. They are an African problem. Because in our mindset, we've got a mode of thinking that affects our mindset, and that is a blaming mode of thinking.
We'll have another discussion around this, especially around the issue of the PAC and Poko and all the other things around the PAC. In a clear reference to what is obtaining today, Philip Kgosana is quoted to have said, and I quote, "There is not a city in South Africa which does not have this other city, the Shack City, full of dirty water and dead dogs. And these are growing. If there are children sleeping on the floor and studying under a tree, and you have the power to change things and you are not using it, why blame apartheid? You have been in charge. There is a misuse of power for the accumulation of wealth. If you get to power and you use it to make yourself rich, you are not doing your job. You are fooling us." This has been Rights and Recourse. The views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the SABC or Rights and Recourse. This program is repeated at 5 on Monday morning. You can also find us on YouTube. From me and the rest of the crew, Goodbye.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 5:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
Bird Island is part of a group of 4 islands and is an important breeding place for marine bird species. They are classified as important bird areas with good reason.
Bird Island is so named for the largest gannetry in the world. We have over 110,000 breeding pairs of gannets, Cape gannets on Bird Island. We also have a very healthy and stable population of the African penguins. As we know, the African penguin is critically endangered. Populations throughout all the colonies have been decreasing for the last 15 years. And today, sadly, we have less than 2% of the original population left. At the Elephant National Park, with the 7 islands that we manage close to 50% of the total population of penguins in South Africa. Here on Bird Island we have just under 3,000 breeding pairs, whilst at St. Croix, which is the largest penguin breeding colony in South Africa, we have just under 7,000 breeding pairs of penguins.
The decline here is similar to declines at all other African penguin colonies, and urgent conservation action is needed. Although a marine